Hi everyone, my name is Heather McAloon, and I'm going to be discussing why is teaching Alaskan history important. So the abstract that I had on my paper is that this PowerPoint and paper is going to encourage and inform you as to why we should be teaching different types of culture, primarily focusing on American Native and American Indian culture. We're going to discuss who should probably inform and educate us on the cultures and why it would be better to hear from them instead of someone else. We're also going to discuss the importance of why we need to keep the cultures accurate, but also important for the cultures to adapt to the world around us. This paper is designed not only to open our eyes, but for the world to realize the importance of not only one culture, but others as well. Our goal is to find out in the end what is going to impact our world, how will it help to show the cultures, and what is the best way to show it. We need to realize that if we don't learn the true cultures, and then the public can be misinformed. This can cause a culture to misdiagnose on its beliefs and for others to look at it in a different light. The goal is to bring attention to the truth of other cultures and to show respect for them the same way they do us. School time. What did you learn? So, I know we all remember sitting there in those hard metal desks while the teachers go on and on about something that majority of us doesn't interest. So, we all did the same. Math, history, social studies, English, science, all those. And I remember a lot of it was just learning from a textbook. Having teachers say, okay, flip to page so-and-so and let's discuss. So I know I hated learning from a textbook, and I'm not sure if many of you enjoyed it or not. But I personally did not interest it. I was more of a hands-on, or when somebody came and spoke to us, or when we had like a special thing or a special activity going on. I was more interested in learning through those. So what's happening to the cultures? So when we learned about, the main one we're going to focus on is history. When we learned about history, we didn't go through and learn about all the cultures. We learned about the certain ones that were able to make it in those really thick, hard textbooks that are barely used nowadays and are really old. But the only ones that were able to make it through those were the ones that we focused and talked about. So my question is, what about the other cultures that for some reason didn't get interested or weren't advertised in the area you lived in? Does that mean they're just not important? Or does that mean we shouldn't talk about them? So what happens to them if we don't talk about them? From what I've learned so far is that they eventually fade. They get advertised in a museum or some other place to advertise the history of that culture if they make it that far. But then you have to look at who advertises them. Is it an actual elder or someone from that community able to advertise and be honest about what that culture represented? Or was it somebody from the outside looking in or that visited a couple of times and said, oh, well, this is what they do. So we have to figure out a way to keep this from happening. So I had a quote that I found on the research that I've done. It said, although we now have approximately 6,000 languages in the world, it is estimated that all but 200 to 250 will perish or come very close to perishing in the next century. So my question is, are we really that out of touch with the cultures that we forget and don't acknowledge all the different languages that are out there? I understand, that we can't be taught every language, and I get that. But that doesn't mean we can't be bringing it to our attention. I mean, after all, the elders are here first. Maybe they can learn some things about their culture or about their language that we can learn from them and make ours better. It's never perfect, so why not keep trying and reaching out and learning from each other to help make our world and make our cultures better? So the next question I'm pondering is, how should we learn about culture? Is it the best way to go on the internet, pick up a site like Wikipedia and say, oh, well, this American Native culture says this on the page, so that means it's automatically accurate? I don't believe that at all. Because anybody can make a page on the internet. It could be somebody from that culture. It could be somebody from the outside saying, oh, well, this is what I think they do. It could even be people joking around and lying online. You never trust 100% completely what you read online unless you know it's from a given published site or something that they can do. So, how is the best way to learn about the cultures? I believe you can go to certain cultures out there and go visit and help. Like the one we read about how the 7 people went to their culture and they stayed out and they camped and they put themselves in the culture. They were able to learn from the people. They went and visited. They went and talked. And that's how they were able to get that first-hand experience. But we can't all do that because you can't go to every part of the world, especially with all of us there, and go talk and stay with each culture. So what would be a better way? I feel like we need to go to each culture. We need to go to each culture. We need to talk to the elders, talk to someone. Maybe somebody can come to the schools, come somewhere and talk and discuss what their culture represents. Maybe we can have a big thing where they have a speaker in a library or something, and people who are interested come. We even have Zoom now because of COVID that they can do it over Zoom and talk. We can even record it and make that history. That way we know for a fact that it came from that certain person in that culture, and it's not a word of mouth kind of thing where details can be missed and you can be misdiagnosed and misrepresented on what that culture actually represents. We need to have somebody step up and say, this is what we need to do. This is how the cultures that they were able to use. The people, for the 5 elders for the 10 days that were able to stay and go for villages, there were 10 to 15, 14 from surrounding villages that would teach them Yupik throughout the way of life that they learned. They were able to go through that and get that word of mouth. And for them to actually come back and tell us what all they did from that first-hand experience instead of saying this is what they seem like they do would be amazing. But also having one of those elders that actually taught them come back and say this is what we taught them. This is what they went through. But also this is what we learned from them. We need to find a better way for us to advertise and get more people involved to spread the area, the cultures. So how do we know all children are getting the education they deserve? So if we have people come in, we have more advertisements, we have more people learning about the other cultures. But what about the young children of the different cultures and backgrounds and ethnicities and all that are already in the schools? How do we make sure they're getting the education they deserve? So there is, in 2004, there was a presidential executive order that was reinforced the need for school personnel to implement the No Child Left Behind Act. This is consistent with tribal traditions, languages, and culture. It's for it all. We have to start bringing awareness to it because no child should be different. And say they don't understand what's being taught that current given second. That doesn't mean they have a smaller brain or doesn't mean they need help outside of the classroom. That just means they might need a little bit extra support on that certain topic. Because you have to remember, they are from different cultures. They are from different dialects and races, ethnicities. And you got to remember, we are all raised differently. I'm raised differently from my friends who are raised. And everyone is taught differently. So that means that if I understand something, they may not necessarily understand it because they're different. It doesn't mean one raised right. It doesn't mean one raised wrong. That's why in school, a lot of times you can say, okay, well, how do you learn? Do you learn visually? Do you learn hands-on? What's the best way to teach you? And they do that to figure out how the best way to relate to you and get that information to you so you learn from it. But the point is if they're from a different culture and they don't understand, say, the standardized English giving out, does that mean they need to go to support class because they don't understand that standardized English? Or can we help give them support and actually recognize why they don't understand it? Maybe they're from a different culture. Maybe they can help integrate that into the classroom and help the other children understand it firsthand instead of saying, oh, well, that's wrong. You need to learn this way. We need to learn how to incorporate all these races and all these ethnicities, especially if one's in your classroom, into the lesson plans, into the curriculum. Make special activities of it. Give guest speakers. Make it where it's interesting, not just educational. Make it where it interests them. So then you have the question of how do cultures spread the word about their own culture? So cultures actually create crafts all the time, which spread their culture out there. Alaska has a lot of American Native and American Indigenous species, people that are encouraged and supported here. I never even realized about Alaska, but they actually have stores that are certain products that are made from the individuals. And it is wrote that you are supporting that certain culture, whatever village or culture or even tribe it may be. However, what do they do if their products aren't being bought? Do they change it and try to match it to the consumer where it matches who's buying it? But the problem is when they do that, are they taking it and changing their product so it matches them instead of representing their culture? How far are they changing it? My question is, how far is too far for them to change it before it becomes more of a product than it does representation of their own culture? How can we make sure that they're still representing completely what their culture is what their culture is about, and still meet the consumer's needs, still sell stuff? How can we advertise and get that out there and want people to buy this stuff? So last but not least on my presentation, I want to talk about adapting. Whose job is it? Is it our job, or the people who aren't in our culture, who are just in their separate other cultures, or in today's society? Is it their job to go to the other cultures and go to them and be like, this is how can we help you? What do we need to do? Is it our job to go out of their way to see what all they need to make sure their culture doesn't fade out, to see if there's something we can do to help them survive? Or is it their job to come out and say, okay, this is what the world has. This technology is what we have. This financial situations are what we have now. Is it their job to come out and figure all this stuff out and say, okay, this is what we need to do in order to help us survive? Which one is it? I feel like it's probably both of us. We need to help and go out of our way to help them, but they also need to come out and help us. We need to learn from each other. Learning from each other is the main thing, because chances are they might have been here before some of us were. They might have heard stuff. They might have seen and learned stuff. And we don't want to repeat that same situation if we can help it. So if we can work together and still be the certain cultures and still represent, it might make it better and might help us make the world better. Because if we, again, learning from each other, that's the thing. We are all unique. We're all special. We're all great. We just have different ways of upbringing. Again, it doesn't mean that there's one above the other. It doesn't mean one's right, one wrong. It just means that there's different ways to do things to still reach end goal, happiness. So how can we all work together to create a unique and great world? So these are my references. So again, the main thing is the kids are the main thing. They're coming up. They're a part of this world. We need to have our elders or other people stand up and say, okay, we need to teach these kids the uniqueness, the different cultures, how they speak, what they do, what they represent. So that way it's not just completely obliterating the other cultures, where it's going to be eventually one or few cultures that are actually represented anymore. We need to represent and bring knowledge to it all. We might not be able to learn from it. We can at least bring awareness to it and the true facts of that culture to the children. We need to make sure that children understand that it's not just one and done, that there is so much language out there, so many different cultures that we can learn from. We just have to work together to figure out a way to incorporate that into the society. Thank you.